Okay, so here we are. We're up at Lonohana State Chocolate, and this is Seneca Klassen.
Hello.
Hello. And this is the a late fall harvest, smaller harvest, that Seneca has pulled out of the fermenter and is beginning to dry. So when did you pull this from the ferment?
Yesterday it came out of the boxes and onto the drying racks at about the same time of day. So this is about 24 hours in to the drying process. So we're just agitating, separating little clusters that have gotten stuck, getting rid of any placenta or other fruit parts that are in here that we don't really want in the finished product.
And what are the key things that you're trying to achieve by rotating these and turning them?
An even dry. We're trying to make sure that things don't cluster together, but they get broken so the individual beans, that we have an even drying process throughout the whole mass. So things, drying is kind of like an end of the fermentation process. It's all like a whole long chain of events rather than like discrete processes. So this is just like slowing down and bringing to a close all the fermentation behavior, and also drying out the beans so that they go from very wet to very dry and stable, so that we'll later be able to take them down to the factory and roast them.
So there's a ton of fruit flies all over this stuff now.
Yeah.
Is that normal?
It is for this particular stage, and you would have seen some fruit flies in the fermenter yesterday when I pulled it out too, because they're actually just, there's microbiological activity going on in the context of the fermentation, but there's also a lot of macrobiological activity, lots of insect life and other things that are helping to eat the fruit pulp, consume the little bits and pieces that we're not interested in, that we actually need to dry up and go away. And the fruit flies are just part of that. By the end of the day today, these will be at a level of dryness that's very different, and you'll literally see no more fruit flies when we come back this afternoon and turn again. So it changes very quickly
And
as
what
conditions change.
What's the length of time that on average, that these beans will stay on the drying racks? And secondly, do you have to maintain these daily in this process?
Yes is the answer to your second question. We want to agitate and make sure things are good on a daily basis. And the first part is the answer to how long is at least a week to 10 days. And then after that, it's all conditions dependent on when we decide they're dry enough that we can bag them up. We're looking for, we at the end of the process, we start using a moisture meter and actually assess the surface dryness of the beans. And we do some cut tests and other analysis. You can see little beetles in here too, not just fruit flies, but lots of other bugs. And they're just literally eating the last of the fruit pulp and stuff. And that's all part of the process. It's all good. So a week to 10 days at least. And then sometimes even a little bit longer, depending on conditions, depending on what's up with the initial moisture levels, with the what happened in the first stages of the fermentation, all kinds of stuff that drives what the drying will be like.
So every batch is treated pretty differently.
Yes, every batch is unique. Every ferment box is unique. They're all little particular animals, and they run slightly differently, and you have to be a bit reactive to get it right.
There's a strong, almost vinegary smell. That's normal when it's just come out of the...
Yeah, and actually smell is a really important tool, assessment tool basically, that's learn how to use it as you put in the reps of doing ferments, but basically you use your sense of smell throughout the process in the fermentary and here on the drying racks. This, I think to most people would be a really sharp and kind of aggressive smell, but to me it's a very satisfying smell because it's a clean vinegary aroma. It is really sharp and strong, but you can smell that it's right in the pocket once you get used to what this smell is telling you.
And what would you be not wanting to smell?
You'd be super bummed to smell like a barnyardy, urine smell. That's a typical over-fermented aroma. It's literally uric acid that gets produced in an over-fermented condition, and so you smell like this pea, barnyard, rotten hay kind of
And
smell.
you can't do anything about that.
That's game over. If you find that on the drying racks, it's already gone wrong before. You can dry the beans down, and they'll dry out and they'll turn into cocoa beans. But for our purposes, there's nothing really we can make out of that. So that's a real bummer. If you've gone too far, it's kind of bad. If you've gone a little not quite far enough, there's sort of still more options, but it's not ideal. And that what you're gonna smell is, well, actually the smell is not super different. There's a different category of vinegary smell to an under-fermented lot. So it does have it's hard for me to describe exactly what that's like, but you definitely can sense it like organoleptically in the beans. Like they feel different. They don't have the right level of squish. There's a tactile difference for sure, because what happens in a properly fermented batch of beans is that really we've turned the seeds into kind of a soupy mass of stuff, and we've broken all the cell walls down in a good fermentation, and so they really feel like there's a give to them, and there's also usually a squirt. If you can see that bean, when I squeezed it, it got very juicy. Let's pick another one. You can see the little bit of juice coming out of the end of that, and so that's a good sign that like everything inside has been properly kind of decomposed and broken down, and it's just a soupy mess in there. And that's really what we want, because what the fermentation achieves is getting us a completely broken down bunch of available ingredients in the seed, and those get catalyzed during our roast. So like the enzymatic cooking does the work of really breaking down all the cell walls and mushing everything into a soupy mess. Then we dry it down so it's stable. Then when we cook it, all that wonderful soupy mess gets catalyzed into all these different long chain molecules that taste like chocolate.
So there's three very distinct but very connected parts of the process before you can even start to make the actual finished product.
That's right. Although you can think of I really think of them as two, because honestly the drying is just an extension of the fermentation.
Okay.
It looks like a different behavior. I mean, it is like practically a different behavior, but really it's like the long tail of the bringing it to a slow and elegant close. That's what we're trying to achieve here on the drying racks.
So there's a ton of stuff that's going on that you just have to know as the chocolate maker and your experience. There's not machines that are going to tell you this. They're not like you're talking about feel, you're talking about smell. I mean,
there are metrics that you can take along the way that will help validate your senses. So like we're always tracking temperature in the fermentary, for instance. Some folks track off-gassing of certain kinds. So like you can use those sorts of data, analytic data, to validate your awareness of what's going on. But honestly, yeah, the best and ultimate only tool is like putting in the reps and doing this over and over and over again until you kind of know what you're seeing and what you're tasting, what you're feeling. And once you have that, in a sense, like the data collection is still relevant, but it's just an assist. It's not there to tell you what to do. Sometimes it can help you make a decision about when to do a certain thing, like when to execute a turn in the ferment box. The data can help you decide when the right moment is, or validate when you think the right moment is, but that's really what it's best at. It's not like really driving the process, it's just supporting it.
Okay, checking back in, Seneca. We're about 4 or 5 hours later,
Yeah, so
and the second kind of rotation of the day.
looking really good. So you can kind of immediately see there's still some insect action, but it's diminishing, and it'll tail off by the time we get to tomorrow. It'll be none, basically, and that's a sign that our external moisture levels have dropped really nicely, because there's nothing more for fruit flies or little beetles to come eat at that time. So yeah,
how's it looking, do you think?
good. It's looking great. The beans feel really nice. That one juicy. They feel great. They're drying up nicely. We got good, lucky conditions. Lots of sun, lots of nice breeze.
I notice a real consistency between them. Is that something that's normal, or just? I mean, everything looks very, very consistent in color and pretty much size too.
It's a good sign that I did okay in the ferment, because we want, you definitely want to see not too much variation. Well, I mean, there'll be some inherent variation, with different size beans, and this time of year especially, the fruit is smaller than the peak in spring, and so you get some beans on the smaller sides. There's a little more variation in bean size than we would normally live in a perfect world, but that's just that's what happens this time of year. These off-season harvests are like that, and so there's a little bit of variation in terms of what happened to them in the fermentary based on that, just mass and things like that. But yeah, coloration looks pretty even, and that's a good sign that the ferment went well and was pretty homogeneous.